You're with Julian on the Brown Note, and Israel versus the International Criminal Court. So, whilst the Western world's leaders, particularly Biden in America, are ass-kissing their way through genocide and apartheid with what's going on in the Gaza Strip, the United Nations and the International Criminal Court are really standing up for justice and what's right and being on the right side of history, like the populations in all of their countries that they represent who don't agree with our leaders. The latest has been the International Criminal Court, and so this is following on from last week. I think the UN broadly voting to, in Australia, so proud of Australia actually being on the right side of history here and not abstaining, voting to increase the likelihood of Palestinian statehood being recognised by the United Nations. So now we've got the International Criminal Court, who are investigating whether or not Israel is committing genocide at the moment. Not a great look. The prosecutor is now seeking arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and 3 of Hamas's leaders, and I believe one more person in Netanyahu's main cabinet, for war crimes in the Gaza conflict. Now, you'll notice the Western news media, whenever something from the UN or the International Criminal Court arrives in the news media, it isn't reported usually as a story. It is usually reported as Israel or America angrily reject. That's the first thing you hear. You watch the news media, how it treats these stories. It's always the condemnation that is the lead part of that story. It's not that it happened. Normally you get the response after or as part of a story. You don't get it as the lead. But not when it comes to Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. So obviously he's not very happy about being an arrest warrant for Hamas leaders over alleged war crimes alongside Hamas's leaders, alongside them, an arrest warrant being sought over war crimes in Gaza. Now, obviously, he's not going to be very happy about it. The chief ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, said there were reasonable grounds to believe Mr. Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant bore criminal responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. The ICC is also seeking a warrant for Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, for war crimes. Israel and the US, its key ally, are not members of the International Criminal Court, which was set up in 2002. The reason is twofold. America was just about to invade Iraq and Afghanistan, which would have the behaviour there would have probably seen them in the lens. But mainly America didn't join the International Criminal Court because they knew that Israel would be the most likely country to be accused. Just the same way as most United Nations resolutions since 1960 by miles have been against Israel. So in order to protect them with their vetoes and their media profile, they decided not to join an organisation designed to hold rogue nations accountable for war crimes. Honourable stuff. 35,500 is the current death toll, mainly women and children, in the conflict in Gaza. Biden said there was no equivalence, and I'm doing this because last week I did a piece on how Biden is hemorrhaging votes over the wars in Ukraine and Israel, and how the last time there was such massive student protests against a war that America backed, which was the Vietnam War, Nixon got elected, which is terrifying this year because we've got Nixon times 10 with dementia. Now, every time Biden does this, he's losing votes. Biden said there was no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas. You're correct, because Israel hasn't been occupied for the last 50 years. And this statement is just the most mind-blowing. It's clear Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. Now, why is Biden saying this? Who is he saying it to? He's hemorrhaging Democratic votes in America every time he says this. It is clear to the international community that Israel is not doing everything it can to ensure civilian protection and is in fact doing the exact opposite. Whether it's hundreds of journalists that have died, whether it's healthcare workers, whether it's international aid workers, or whether it's the enormous proportion of the 35,500 who have been killed by the Israeli Defense Force, who are women and children, it's clear they're not doing their best. All they can do to ensure civilian protection. What a load of crap. US Secretary of State. So this is the interesting part, really why I did it. So the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, echoed the president's condemnation, saying Washington fully rejects the move. It's shameful. And this comment for the ages. The International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over this matter. Let's have a look at what the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over. The International Criminal Court is an intergovernmental organisation and international tribunal seated in The Hague in the Netherlands. It's the first and only permanent international court with jurisdiction to prosecute individuals for international crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and crimes of aggression. Who on earth has more jurisdiction over this matter than the International Criminal Court? It's absolutely mind-blowing. Israel and America are behaving in this conflict as bad as any rogue nations can. And it's incredible that the august bodies we set up in The Hague, the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, the previous iteration of it, were all to do in the wake of the Holocaust to stop nations behaving like this. And it is clear to the world that America supports its friends in committing genocide, and it doesn't really care if its enemies aren't really doing anything wrong. It will ask that they be punished with sanctions, where the whole global community will rise up against whoever they pick. He is losing his election by his support of Israel, and the worse Israel responds, the worse it is for Biden. And whatever he's doing behind the scenes, it doesn't transfer publicly at all. To say that the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction here is absolutely the most mind-blowing thing you could say, apart from Biden saying Israel is clearly doing everything it can to stop civilian casualties. The hypocrisy over this is tainting Biden so hard, particularly when Russia is being condemned by the same man for doing very similar things in Ukraine. And he will then say that they're not the same. Hypocrites always say it's not the same. Hypocrites never agree that what they condemn and what they approve are the same, because they're not basing it on rational thought. They're basing it on who's their friend and who's their enemy. And Netanyahu doesn't even like Biden. Netanyahu is probably thinking, just the same as Putin is thinking, if Trump wins, all of that funding in Ukraine is gone. Netanyahu is thinking, if Trump wins, all of that, any condemnation from America is dried up in an instant. It is remarkable, but well done to the International Criminal Court for actually coming after people like Netanyahu, who is a monster, arguably the world's most dangerous man at this point, a horrifying man. He always has been, and to see an arrest warrant against him would be beautiful.